expert in autism, Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. Welcome back to, it looks like it's still Ask Dr. Doreen. We were going to go to Autism Live, but we're having trouble connecting with Dr. Stephen Shore. Hopefully he's going to be able to join us soon. So in the meantime, Dr. Granpeesheh agreed to come back and answer some of the questions that you guys had written in, because this is the podcast-a-thon, and this is how we do it.
We got to keep going.
We keep going no matter what. So I'm going to start with some of the questions that you guys had written in and saying congratulations to all the winners. Okay, well, a very specific question about what's a good way to get my son's iron levels up. Because one of the things that you talked about was that anxiety, you can be if you have too much of something or too little of something. I remember they put me on vitamin D. My vitamin D was so catastrophically low, and I thought, well, that can't be causing my anxiety. And yet it helped.
Yeah, and you had also this phase where you had a lot of vertigo. Do you remember?
Oh, I totally remember.
Yeah, and that's a very common one that causes anxiety. Any kind of dizziness, yeah. They're very correlated with each other. You know, I really recommend functional medicine physicians, and they're everywhere.
Yes.
And you just have to find one, because the functional medicine doctors will start with, and I know sometimes our kids, this in itself will cause anxiety, but they'll do a blood test. And from that, they will, because urine testing is not going to be able to give you everything, but together that will give you a lot of information about any kind of deficiency. Iron is not that hard to replace. There are supplements, obviously. You would want to make sure that your child is able to take the supplements. Be careful with iron. Iron also causes constipation. So a lot of times when you take iron, it's together with a stool softener in the pill. So, you know, you can just supplement according to what your body needs, and that's super important.
Yes, wonderful. They also wrote about transition anxiety, when they're transitioning from one thing to another.
And I love the fact that some of the folks on here are talking about sensory experiences that help our kids. You know, as I was talking, kind of saying that one of the ways to get out of your head is just to feel the things that are around you and start to one by one go through your body and what it is experiencing. With our children, a lot of times it helps if they're doing things that involve smell. Definitely. Smell is, in fact, one of those that a lot of people have found really, really affects memory. Like, you know, smell is very closely associated to various experiences and memory. Like, it evokes memory.
In both a good way and a bad way,
In a good way and a bad way. So if you can establish routines or experiences that are wonderful for your child and pair them with a particular smell, that smell in the future will cause comfort and happiness and will bring about some of the positive emotions that you paired. This is why a lot of us love candles that smell like candy cane, because of Disneyland, because of places where we were kids. We would go to those places, it was just heaven, and we paired it with that smell.
I am not going to make a Gwyneth Paltrow joke. I'm just saying. Pamela Elmore says, this is so good, thank you. Will the slides be available? I appreciate this information so much. And you had said we could
Absolutely,
we can make those available.
Of course. We will provide you all the slides.
Okay. Joanne had written in while you were talking about some of the cognitive distortion and things of that nature, and says this works with the higher functioning kids, which is kind of what you had been saying before, that if there's the level of understanding to be able to cognitively look at it, that's absolutely true. And she said, I know exactly what you're talking about, but my son has severe autism and is nonverbal. I've been attacked many times. Breathing does not work in that case. And of course it doesn't. You're absolutely right. Because when you are still being attacked, like that's trauma. And so anxiety because of trauma, if it's still happening, is an entirely different kettle of fish.
Now remember, anxiety is a feeling, right? Anxiety is a feeling, and as we said, it is usually a feeling of apprehension. In other words, something bad's going to happen in the future, right? What you're going through is trauma over and over and over. So you're essentially habituating your body to trauma, and you're saying, oh, this is just going to be part of my life. It shouldn't. You need to really there's no need to focus on the anxiety. Your anxiety is a normal response to what you're experiencing. You need to actually go in and try to figure out how you can gain support for the hitting. And remember, we're talking again about challenging behavior, and every child will stop those challenging behaviors if they're given a different way to communicate whatever it is. So that's where your focus needs to be on doing a functional analysis of the hitting and getting help for that.
I didn't take a second at the start of the show to say that we are going to be giving away another 10 gift cards in this hour from Discovery Toys.
Great.
How you can make yourself eligible is by, on YouTube or on Twitter or on Facebook, write in a comment or a question, and then you are eligible. Every time you write in a comment or a question, that is one ticket that goes in the hat. At the end of the hour, we will draw out 10 names. And you can only win one, though. So if you've already won, you can still comment and question, but your name won't go into the hat and you won't win. Be very happy that you've won a Discovery Toy gift card. We love Discovery Toys. They've been very generous with us for the podcast-a-thon. We won't be giving them away every hour, but every once in a while we'll pop up and go, this is an hour that we're going to be giving them away. It's super fun. I will say, though, that you can only use the gift cards on the USA Discovery Toys website. You'll get those instructions when I email the gift card to you. It's a virtual gift card. They will not work on Amazon or in any store or on any sites that are around the world, just the US site.
Yes.
So a wonderful thing. Now, Carrie wrote in and said, if an adult is showing signs of both anxiety and autism, what benefits are there for that adult to be evaluated?
That's really good.
What kind of treatments are available for adults?
Great.
It's a great question.
That's a fabulous question, because you just gave a perfect example of a situation where if the individual is suffering from both anxiety and autism, and let's say they've only been diagnosed with autism, they're very unlikely to be placed on an SSRI medication. It's possible, but unlikely. But if they're diagnosed with anxiety, they are going to be offered a medication for anxiety, which, by the way, will definitely also affect the autism. Like, it will improve things for your child. And the other thing is, no one's going to really focus on doing cognitive behavior therapy or even behavioral, like desensitization. No one's dealing with the anxiety, and the anxiety will continue to evoke types of emotions and things that will make the experience of autism harder.
Okay, amazing.
So it's important to get the eval.
Yes, absolutely, always. Joanne had written in and said that when we were talking about breathing and taking deep breaths, because we've had this happen before where people have written in and said, I have a small child who doesn't have language, teaching them how to breathe. She says, we tell them to smell the flower.
I love that.
And then blow out the candle while demonstrating how to do it. I love that. I also love that in a lot of schools now where they're teaching meditation, in the preschools, they have what they call breathing buddies.
Yeah.
And they model this behavior too. They lay down on the mats with kids and they get to pick out which stuffed animal they want to be their buddy. And they put the stuffed animal on their belly. Oh. And then the teacher says, okay, we're gonna take, they use the words, we're going to take a deep breath, but we're going to make the thing go up, and then we're going to push out the air and make it go down.
That's right.
And so then the kids focus on that, and they'll go at the rate that the teacher teaches them. And then the pairing of, now we're going to breathe in and we're going to breathe out, they learn, oh, that's what it is. Right. When you're blowing the air, it's the breathing out. So I love that.
I remember thinking that when we were all getting trained on CPR. Because CPR dummies are perfect for learning how to breathe in and out, right? Because you blow into them and they inflate.
You know what I learned from watching, I don't know whether it was Grey's Anatomy or the one that's right before it, but because now they're teaching people for CPR to sing the Bee Gees song, Staying Alive.
Oh yeah, that's the beat. That's the beat.
I didn't know that. I learned that.
Yeah, my daughter taught me that when she got her EMT.
Yes, that's amazing. Okay, I want to go back. Yes, we were talking about ear muffs, that they were really important. Joanne asked a really good question. Why is anxiety so prevalent right now, Dr. Doreen?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's several different reasons, honestly, Johnny. One is, of course, we all just the entire world just went through COVID, and a lot of bad things happened during COVID, right? A lot of people were ill, a lot of people passed away. I mean, it was probably, I would say, at the beginning of COVID was one of the highest periods of anxiety globally, right? I mean, it was unbelievable, a pandemic, but it was kind of like, what is this? Yeah. And for those of us who have lived through other viruses, they were never as big as this, right? I mean, we've been through several
Not
others.
in our lifetime.
Not in our lifetime, right. So if you go back to the Spanish flu, it probably was. But in our lifetimes or in the last centuries, it has been a long, this was a global anxiety-evoking event. And it lasted for a long time, and it therefore kind of generalized to other things, right? So now, if you think about it, if someone has gotten chronically ill, they will always ask themselves, I wonder if it was from the vaccines that I got. Mm-hmm. Or, in fact, someone the other day, I said to someone, I hadn't even thought about this, but someone, I was mentioning that autism has increased to 1 in 36, and they said, oh, is that because of COVID vaccine? Mm. And I said, actually, this is pre-vaccine. This is 2020, early 2020, right. So we'll just have to see what happens after this. But, so that's another source of anxiety, which is always apprehension about the future. The other thing, of course, is, you have a cough or someone out there coughs, and everyone is immediately like, oops, what's going on? Yes. So like we've been taught to be hypersensitive. So, and COVID had multiple other things that happened. Obviously, people lost jobs, people lost money, people lost their homes. And of course, those types of conditions that are very real will cause also a lot of fear and anxiety. So that's also another part of what is happening. But I think also overall, like we talk about how anxiety is very correlated to serotonin, right? I mean, every medication for anxiety is to regulate serotonin. And our neurotransmitters are heavily impacted by the food we eat. And, I am a big believer that unfortunately our food source has become very toxic, and it's not really providing the nutrition that it should anymore. And part of that is also that it is not regulating our neurotransmitters appropriately, and causing all sorts of issues and illnesses. Anxiety is just one of them.
And I don't know a single soul who hasn't been experiencing some pretty big anxiety in the last couple of years. And people are managing it in different ways. But when I saw the definition that you gave, I was like,
everyone.
It's everybody I know. Everybody I know.
Yeah.
Amy wrote in and said, over the past year has been a tough time.
Yeah.
We are working on teaching my nonverbal 16-year-old how to communicate his feelings without being aggressive.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It's very, very hard, and especially when your child has hit 16 and they're nonverbal, they are prone to become frustrated, and when we are frustrated, we tend to have challenging behaviors rather than express ourselves. I mean, think about us. We have language, we have very advanced language, and when we're frustrated, we tend to yell at each other, right? We yell, people will cuss, like whatever. I was just at a wedding, as you know, and there was like a fight. A fight broke out, a physical fight. Oh my goodness. And you think to yourself...
You left out the headline when I asked you how the wedding was.
I know, but I'm just like, you think to yourself like adults fighting? I mean, it's so... But that's what we do. People do that when they're very frustrated. And so with our kids who don't even have the ability to express themselves adequately, it is just something they're more prone to do that than to use words. I really, I guess the message I want to get out there is that you should be getting help. There's medical insurance that covers ABA, and a lot of ABA folks will be able to help you with managing those challenging behaviors. This is one of those things that's really important. There are so many people in need of support and help, And behaviorists can really help when it comes to just making sure that your child learns a different way to communicate.
And can I put in a word about respite here? You
Yes.
talked about it earlier, but if you have a
Yes.
16-year-old that is having trouble communicating and engaging in challenging behavior to do that, then can I please, please, please beg you to get as much respite care as you possibly can, because you need it. You need
Yeah.
to have time away where you can be who you are. Tomorrow at, I believe it's 4 o'clock, we're doing a special episode of Let's Talk Autism with Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson. And we have the filmmaker and the subject matter, the star of the documentary Beyond, Tamara Mark. And I have to recommend this film to you because Tamara is a former dancer who had 2 boys. Both ended up being pretty impacted on the autism spectrum. And it is one of the most raw depictions of what it is like to live in a home with these 2 amazing souls
Right.
who are struggling to be able to communicate, and what they
amazing.
do, and what this amazing, I mean, this woman needs to be nominated for sainthood because she brings her dancer soul to her children and can communicate with her children, but it's a lot. And the movie is about the fact that it's a full-time job for her.
Absolutely.
And in it, you know, she talks about I every once in a while I got to step away, but the planning that has to happen in order for her to step away
It's tremendous.
is tremendous.
Yeah.
But it's worth it. It is
Yeah.
worth it. It's important to do.
What is it called again?
It's called Beyond.
Beyond.
And it's a really beautiful feature-length documentary. And
Is it available now? Or?
it's in film festivals right now, but I can hook you up.
Okay.
And for all of you, we'll ask
love
the
to see
director tomorrow will tell us about when and how you can watch it. They're doing showings different places
Fabulous.
right now, but it's really a beautiful, a very important film in my opinion.
Absolutely.
I hope that they're going to enter it in the Academy Awards now that we know how that works now.
Yes.
We didn't know before how that worked, and now we know how that works. But anyway, but I really want to encourage you to be kind to yourself, because that is a lot. To have, first of all, you always say, and I said this about you before, you're like the best person at perspective taking in the world. And if I try to think like you think, right? That, oh, what would Dr. Granpeesheh, do you know how often I say that? What would she say? But I'm thinking about, do you remember when you were 16?
Yeah.
And all the raging hormones that you had going on,
Yeah.
and you couldn't figure things out, and it was like, why did everything just change? And if you didn't have a way of talking about that with anybody, or writing about it, or having, like, I know people who were like, they didn't know how to deal with those feelings, so they ran. But you know, I used to love the Waltons. And in the original Walton movie, he journals, and it's in the original book, he journals about, I'm 16 years old, and my body is growing, and I feel like maybe I'm going to explode.
Yeah.
And it's very honest and raw about what it feels like to be a 16-year-old boy. Imagine if he didn't have that outlet to write.
Yeah.
What
in fact,
that must be like.
journaling is a very respected tool in therapy.
But so for our kiddos who don't have communication,
It's so hard.
And I don't know if Mike
so
Hipple
hard.
is still watching, but Mike can tell you that, you know, before he got his AAC device and was able to type, you know, he talks very eloquently about what that was like for him. And he's a huge proponent of making sure that they have devices so they can communicate. So he's a ball of frustration at 16 not being able to communicate. But that's hard for you to be there with. And you're going to need to take some time away.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make you a bad parent. That will actually make you a better parent if you give yourself some time and space to remember who you are, aside from being your child's parent.
that's
It's
so
hard.
important.
It's so hard, right? But
It really is. It's
Sending you a
there's-
hug.
Yeah. It's
Sending
just
you a
very
hug.
difficult.
2008, R.A. Fix wants to know, and I'm not familiar with this book. They want to know, what's your opinion of this book, Teach Me Language by Sabreena Freeman. They've been recommended the book to increase conversational speech in my 9-year-old son. And I'm not familiar with it.
You know, I have this book, and I remember having positive feelings about this book, but I don't remember what in it I liked, because I must have seen it a long time ago.
Okay.
So, but I have this book. So if I keep a book, it's usually because I think it's good in some way.
All right. Well, not a ringing endorsement, but close.
Yeah.
So there you go. I want to acknowledge that so many of you have written in. Judy said, wow, can't say thank you enough for how this information is helping so many lives. Excuse me. And she says, we look up to you, Shannon and Dr. Doreen. I'm just the person carrying the water.
No.
She's the messenger.
No.
Lucy says, I love Autism Live. Thank you for covering important topics and CBT. Really wonderful. Amanda says, my son is on 1 ml of Prozac. I don't know why I'm so scared to pull him off. After I do, he will be 100% off the pharmaceutical meds. I'm having a hard time taking that final leap. We've been weaning off for 7 months now. He's been on since 11 and he's 14 now. His doctor said I can take him off. It's just me. Well, bless your heart, Amanda.
Well, I love that because you now give us an opportunity to practice some of the stuff we just talked about. Because, Amanda, you're saying you have anxiety about taking him off. Can you tell us why? Can you tell us what about that thought gives you anxiety? Do you think he will fall apart as soon as you take him off the 1 milligram? Let's figure out what the cognitive distortion is here.
There we go. And sometimes just pulling it out into the light is really, really helpful.
Yeah.
I don't like elevators, and there was a time and a place when we were moving offices, and we'd been in a building where we were working on the 2nd floor, and Dr. Granpeesheh came in and was so excited and said, "Oh, we're moving to a new building. It's so great, and wait till you see." And we're on the 18th floor, and I said, "It's been lovely working with you. It's been nice knowing you." I'm
out of here.
I really, and I meant it sincerely. And do you recall what you said to me next?
I said, we'll do shaping, or what did I say?
You said, well, we'll start the systematic
desensitization
desensitization on Monday. And the thought of having to get in an elevator and have her talk me down, I went and did it without you.
Well, and you were, not only did you do that, but you later had some really good experiences in elevators that you brought to a class.
Did I?
Yes, which was where you got into the elevator. This was when you were talking about how people working together should get to know each other. And you started with this kind of comedy skit, which was my favorite thing in the world, where you went in and you said, I get into an elevator and there's like 10 other people coming to my floor and we're all looking at each other and we're like, who's that? Who's this? And we don't know each other. And
or having an in-depth conversation. And because there was one person that I was standing there and saying, how are your grandkids? How, did your grandson start kindergarten? I'm so glad. And then she gets off the elevator and the other person goes, what's her name? And I said, I don't know. I've known her for 3 years. I have no idea what her name is. Yes, well, that's me in the elevators. But I don't miss that elevator at all.
No, I don't either.
We're on the ground floor here, and it makes me very happy. I left New York City because I swore I was not going to do elevators again. I only did the elevator for you.
Thank you.
And that's I only
you succeeded.
Because it was important to me. It's that value thing. You said, if you find a value that's really important to you, it was, am I not going to do a show with Dr. Granpeesheh anymore? Am I going to get over the elevator thing? Some days were easier than others. Can we say that? So Amanda has written in and says, I think he'll fall apart completely. Scared to see him off of it, but I know we have our diet and supplements in place as well. And she said, I did miss the presentation because I was putting my kids to sleep.
So that's actually awesome because you can go back and watch the last hour because I talked about things that cause us anxiety and how our mind plays these tricks. And this one is catastrophizing. You are thinking that a catastrophe is about to happen, and it's not. It's just your mind being overly protective and thinking, oh my gosh, you've been weaning him off for 7 months. So I think the last milligram is good. And also think about this. If he has a little meltdown, you can always add the 1 milligram and take even more time. There's no, catastrophes very, very rarely happen in real life. And a lot of times it's our belief system that is controlling those fears.
Yeah, somebody said something to me once, because I have a lot of anxiety. Even listening to you talk about anxiety, I don't know if you noticed, I was getting a little anxious.
Yeah, there was like part of you that was into it and part of you that was like,
yeah, I was like,
don't
this
even...
is fascinating. It's me. Oh, I don't know how happy I am to hear that. Yeah. And Traven, I have to tell you that the battery on my iPad is dying, so I might have to switch it out or plug it in.
I'll give you this one.
Okay. Because otherwise I will lose my questions, and I don't want to. Yes, I know recently I went through a thing, because it's that thing about moving the dial. We're about to, in 25 minutes, we're going to have Dr. Temple Grandin with us. And there was a time and a place where I was sitting in a restaurant with Dr. Grandin, and my son was there, and we were having this conversation, and my son threw me under the bus to Dr. Temple Grandin. And he, because Temple was talking to him and saying, what are you doing? What are you working on?
Right.
And, what's your life like and stuff? And they were having this conversation while they were eating spare ribs, and they were having a good time. I wish you'd been there, because the conversation that they were having
was hilarious.
It was hilarious. And she started telling him about an article in a Business Weekly magazine that was about pairing wines with cat food.
Oh my gosh.
Different cat food dinners.
Oh my
and they
goodness.
got the giggles, the two of them, I wish there'd been cameras. It was the most fun to sit there and watch that. But then my son took a left turn and threw me under the bus to Dr. Grandin, and he said, well, my life isn't very good because my mom won't let me go. We'd just come through an airport, an international airport, and I wouldn't let him go in the bathroom by himself, in the men's room.
Okay.
I made him go in the women's room, and there was a woman in there who had a minor cow
Oh my gosh.
about it, and she was like, why is he in here? He's a teenager. He was like 11, but he was tall. And I was like, could you, you're in a stall. What are you so worried about, right? But then he says to Dr. she won't let me go to the men's room by myself. And Dr. Grandin was like, that stops right now, right here. And she said, right now, I want you to get up and go to the men's room. And she gave him a couple of rules. And she said, do you know what you're doing? And he was like, yes.
I love that. That's amazing.
And she was like, and you're going to sit right here and you're going to deal with it. But one of the things that at the time, I was doing ACT therapy. And one of the things that they kept bringing up is that I have this value that I want to keep my son safe, but I have this other value that I want him to live this amazing independent life.
Right.
And that the two go like this sometimes.
Yes.
And that I have to recognize and be aware of that and say, okay, recently I couldn't even have imagined this when my son was 4 or 5, that after his finals, he went away on a ski trip to Big Bear with like 5 of his friends for 3 days before Christmas.
Yeah.
Someone sedate me. I was like, you're gonna do what?
Yeah.
And of course I told you, and you were like, oh, how fabulous. And I was
how
like,
fun. Did he have a good time?
What are you talking about? And it was great, and he had a great time. But I was, 8 feet off the floor with anxiety. And then somebody said to me, but isn't the goal that someday you want him to call you and be like, oh, today
I'm hanging out with the guys.
Today I'm in Brisbane, and me sitting at lunch with somebody saying, oh, he's in Brisbane, and that gave me something else to picture.
Yeah.
And the only way you get there is but you have to keep moving the goalposts. So. Amazing, Amanda, that you've recognized that you've done all the work and that now now it's you. You're having the anxiety.
Yeah.
I think that's half the battle, right?
It definitely is, and it's really all when Amanda goes back and looks at this, the last presentation, it's really, it changes your life when you have the ability to start analyzing your thoughts. And this is actually, it's very interesting, something Kobe said that I said to you later. I said he reminds me of someone else that we both know. And it's because of that. It's almost like he is analyzing his thoughts and what he wants to try to get through as he's saying it, which is what makes it very hard for him. And he was saying that it's like I'm thinking as I'm speaking. I experience that when I'm in like a different language, like a foreign language, because you have to pick your words, right? And you're not fluent. It doesn't just fall in place. So you kind of have to figure out, how am I expressing myself here? And you're also thinking. But that ability, which so many of our kids who have, let's say, gone through years of ABA or cognitive behavior therapy, or have gotten to that kind of very highest level where they can actually analyze their thoughts, they just learn to be extremely aware individuals, like more so than the normal population.
Yeah.
I have that with so many of my kids that they, like, this is an example where Jem was, he was much younger, you know, and you were panicking or something, and he was like, Mom, I think you need to calm down and take a few deep breaths. But that's what I mean. Like, the kids actually learn incredible. Like, I don't know if one of my kids, as I'm writing this book, and asking a lot of the kids who have gone through therapy to kind of tell me their experience and so on, I find these responses to be unbelievably deep.
Yeah.
And just so self-aware.
Yes.
It's incredible
Yes.
that they are just, and that awareness of the self, I think, will help them with anxiety. This is what we all need to be, is like aware of how funny the reasons are for our anxiety, you know?
Yeah, it's almost like, you know, when somebody takes the time to teach you perspective taking,
Yes.
your understanding of yourself and other people is so
Just
much
changes.
more profound. And I think maybe there used to be more of that in the education system for neurotypical people that isn't there anymore.
No.
That, you know, it's almost this crazy thing to me that when people talk about, well, you know, that for individuals on the spectrum, part of their deficit is perspective taking, it's almost always coming out of the mouth of someone who is not bothering to take their perspective.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to go,
That's true.
I want to go, you know, that finger pointing thing about when
Yeah,
you're pointing
you're
one
focusing-
finger, the other four are going to you. Check out where those four fingers are.
Yeah.
Because
a lot of people have a hard time with perspective taking, a lot of people.
a lot of very neurotypical
Yep.
grown people have a hard time with that.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
I also want to acknowledge our journey, Cameron's New Life says, I know if it was not for both of you, my son would not be where he is today. Very grateful. We're
Thank
sending
you.
you a
Thank
hug.
you.
Absolutely sending you a hug. Lucy says, can you provide more information on sensory therapy? Temple Grandin mentioned this during a short video during the break. The sensory therapy was in addition to ABA and OT. Also, would sensory therapy be a part of OT? What does sensory therapy consist of?
I think, I mean, and I'm not sure because we weren't listening during the break.
I know which clip it is, though.
Okay. And is she speaking about sensory integration, or?
Well, there was a study that came out about, I don't know, 8 years ago that talked about sensory integration therapy and how it could be very effective used in conjunction with ABA. And it was something that she was talking about a lot at that time. Then, as happens with all things, a bunch of people hung out a thing saying, I do sensory integration therapy, and they weren't.
Yes.
And so Temple talks about it less, I think, only because, not that she doesn't support what the original study said, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, but there are a lot of people who say that they're doing sensory integration, and it's not what was the study was shown to be effective.
That's very true. That's really very true, because I have observed a lot of occupational therapists, you know, and it's interesting because in this part of the world, like ABA is primary in general.
Yes, yeah.
In other parts of the world, occupational therapy is primary.
Oh, India, yeah.
A lot of the Middle East, it's all about OT. And some OT folks are trained in sensory integration. And let me just explain that, you know, we know very little about sensory integration. But what it is we're talking about sensory dysregulation to begin with. So individuals who will experience either too much of something or not enough of something. And I loved that Kobe was also talking almost, I use those words so often, that it is about how they perceive the world, how the individual perceives the world. And, you know, I always talk about visual input and how they see things, how they hear things. He was also adding how you sense things on your skin and
Yes.
textures and so on. And sometimes it's funny because he was saying, I loved my conversation. If you can't tell, I've referred to Kobe like 10 times today.
Well, he was
But
so inspirational.
He's awesome. And he was just talking, I mean, I feel like I learn the most when I have conversations with individuals like him.
Yeah.
Over all the years, I've learned the most from my adult kids because they just tell me so much. But you know, he was saying that when he was younger, sometimes certain clothes would feel like sandpaper on his skin, and that over time he got acclimated to it, and it doesn't feel that way anymore. That means that particular sensory sensitivity gradually regulated itself, so that over time he no longer has that strong reaction. And that could happen with auditory, visual, auditory integration therapy. Was the goal of it was to integrate sounds so that you are not just hearing those extreme sounds. With visual use of goggles and prisms, the goal of it is to integrate your vision in a way that you're not just seeing things in a particular way, but you're seeing them in the way the rest of us see things or receive that information. So, and sensory integration can, on certain individuals, that was my response to Kobe, was, what was he saying? He was saying he hated the feeling of things that are constraining. Mm-hmm. And I said, that's so interesting because some people need that feeling in order to feel grounded. A lot of kids don't have a good proprioceptive sense, which is like their own body in space. They don't feel the ground. They don't, they feel they're lost. They're running around and all this sort of stuff. And weight actually will help them, and they sleep better when they're weighted down. They have things that will help them feel their body better. So it's both directions, right? So some kids feel one way, others have other sensory dysregulation, and these activities some of the activities that are in sensory therapy or sensory integration can upregulate you, and others can downregulate you. So I find, for instance, if I have a child who is extremely hyper, there are certain activities where I can actually, like for instance, if I roll them in a blanket, if they're tightly rolled up, it will help them downregulate and it will help them calm down. Same as when you see children who really, I have a child right now who, if he just missed about 4 or 5 days because he had a rash, he missed 4 or 5 days of swimming. And let me tell you, his behavior was black and white, so like completely different. And now we're back to swimming again, and swimming has such a huge impact on regulating his senses. Other activities might upregulate you, for instance, playing with rice or beads or putting your hands inside those things. So, a good occupational therapist who has been trained in sensory integration has a lot of these up their sleeve, and they can kind of identify what your child needs, and then they can tell your ABA team or whoever is spending your classroom, et cetera, your teachers, to actually put those sensory activities inside the child's schedule. We used to call it a sensory diet, and you would be doing these types of activities to help regulate the child over the day.
Okay, a couple of quick things. Dr. Shore, I think, is going to try to join now for these last 15 minutes, but there's a couple of things that I want to get to. R has written in and said, how do I get ABA therapy for my 5-year-old who's currently getting early intervention therapy but will age out of the program when she starts school at 6? Will the school bring in ABA therapists? I need to know, where are you? Are you in the United States, and if so, what state? Because it's very likely that your child shouldn't be aging out of, and you absolutely can be getting ABA, but if you'll write in,
and also
we'll talk
early
about that.
intervention is supposed to be kind of the same.
Yeah.
So there's no end at 5 or 6 for sure. And if your school doesn't provide it, your health insurance most likely will.
And the ABA most likely, there are a couple of exceptions of schools that have what is actually really ABA, but like I guarantee you it's not what your school has, because it would be a world famous ABA school. And there's like what, 2, 3 of them? It probably isn't your school. They're going to tell you that they're going to do ABA at the school, which means they're going to use some of the principles of ABA, but you're not going to get intensive ABA, because that would be 1-to-1.
Well, and the next question is it normal to have an IEP including intensive ABA? You can. You could have an IEP which gives you intensive ABA, but it is more likely that you will not. It's more likely that someone will tell you we're going to do 10 hours of ABA in the classroom, and if it's in the classroom and it's with multiple other kids, it's not really 1-to-1 ABA. So I would suggest that you approach outside health insurance as well as have your school provide ABA. You want it in all environments.
And she's in Wisconsin, or they are in Wisconsin, and they went on to say, okay, they told us that they only work at this facility until age 6, and I just lost my iPad.
So then you basically,
so
then basically what you would do is you will get health insurance. You'll talk to your insurance company. They will offer you providers of ABA. You will contact those folks and get started. And by the way, if they take too long, go back to your insurance, because they're obligated to have contact with your child, usually within 30 days.
Yes, there is a phrase that every time we talk about it on the air, people kind of lose their minds over it. But because so many people post-pandemic have been told, oh, you're on a waiting list, and it's like a year later and they haven't started services. And you do need to call your insurance company, and you need to say that this is a denial of access to care. I'm going to say that again slower. A denial of access to care. And you will notice that they'll be like, hold on a minute, and suddenly you'll be talking to somebody else, and suddenly they'll be like, well, we might have to switch your provider and da-da-da-da-da, because it's illegal to charge you a premium and then say we don't have somebody. And by the way, this isn't just for autism. This is if you're having a pain in your hip and you've been referred to the specialist. This is for your mom who has Alzheimer's. This is the story across the board that people are being told, well, we don't have somebody for you to see for the next 6 months. Well, then they have to pay for somebody else. That's what health insurance is, not health sometimes when we have somebody here to take you. And ask me how I really feel about all of that. Traven's going to let us know when we have Dr. Shore, and I'm going to continue on until then. Okay, he's here. We're just going to get him in. Let me talk a little bit about him. And you were saying before that this is somebody that, you know, you love and respect and have for a long, long time. Dr. Stephen Shore is a professor of special education at Adelphi University. And
how lucky are those folks?
No kidding.
Yeah, that they
seriously.
learn actually the reality. Yeah, it's awesome.
And he is an outspoken advocate for individuals, especially adults, on the autism spectrum, and for their rights and for their human and civil rights, and speaks around the world on a regular basis doing that. He is the person who is credited with saying, when you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. So we welcome Dr. Shore to the program and are thrilled to have him here with us, if we in fact do. Can I talk a little bit about his books till he comes in? He's got a bunch of different books. He's been a part of a lot of different research. Some of my favorite books of his include College for Students with Disabilities.
Amazing.
Understanding Autism for Dummies. Love that one. Living Along the Autism Spectrum, Beyond the Wall, and Ask and Tell, Self-Advocacy and Disclosure for People on the Autism Spectrum. What an amazing, amazing body of work that he has. Are we able to bring him in yet? Perhaps not. I love, Dr. Shore speaks all over the world. And I had said to him the other day that I'm so excited to have him here because he used to go on a regular basis on a series of different places that he would go with Joanne Lara. They would often speak together and go to India and places like that. And so I always feel like I'm close to Joanne when I get a chance to speak to Dr. Shore. And he is the ultimate from his personal experience after being diagnosed with autism, and his parents were given that never talk that Holly was talking about earlier with RJ. Well, you know, he's never going to do, because imagine, you know, what autism was like when Dr. Shore was diagnosed. You know, but his parents were given this, you know, very, oh, well,
yes,
you know,
lifelong.
And I believe, we'll ask him to confirm, but I believe they said, you know, put him in an institution. Which, can I tell you that when the woman who diagnosed my son, it was her first day of her retirement. She'd been working in the field for 50 years.
Yeah.
And she said, well, you should just consider yourself lucky, because if this were the first day, that I would have absolutely told you to put this child in an institution and walk away and never look back. My child, you know, like I can't even, there's Dr. Shore. But, you know, his parents didn't listen, and here we have this amazing individual. Dr. Shore, welcome. He can hear us, but I don't think we can hear him yet. Well, I'm going to keep saying nice things about him. He's also an accomplished musician.
Yeah. That's right, he is.
And someone who, you know, I just always feel like when he speaks, it's like he just cuts right through the crap and goes right to the heart of the matter about the fact that these are individuals and they have rights.
Yeah.
I don't
Have
know
you
why
ever met him in person?
Yes.
Yeah, he's very calming presence.
Yes,
and
the soul
just
is
a
soothing.
Really lovely person. Yeah.
I just was, after you said that, I was thinking, oh, what must it be like to be a student in his classroom?
I know, how nice, right?
Right?
I would love to be in his classroom.
Well, and then next, in just a few minutes, we're going to have Dr. Temple Grandin.
I know.
And I've talked to people who have been in her classroom before. I don't know if you know this about Dr. Grandin. I'm sure I'm not supposed to say it. She's going to be mad if I say it, but she, you know, she speaks internationally too, and she commands a pretty, you know, a nice price when she speaks, which she donates to her college programs, so that no student that goes through is denied being able to be there and has money to be able to go. Isn't that not one of the most philanthropically lovely things ever on the face of the planet?
Love that.
Absolutely love that. So what do we think? We've got like 7 minutes left now.
I almost feel like we should really just try to get Stephen back for another hour or another half hour somewhere, because
maybe we need to do that.
It's too valuable of an interview to do
I
in 7 minutes.
I don't want to rush it. If we think we can do it,
I'm happy to give up some of my time too and interview him on one of my shows.
Okay, well, and we've got time. We especially have, you know, he could join us in the last hour. He could be talking to us while we're shaving my head. I don't know if he has a class then, but we'll talk to him about that if he can't come in. But I was dying to know what his thoughts were on the new CDC numbers and what that feels like for him, because it's been very interesting to me, everybody's individual reaction to that. That some people have said, well, it's just a number, and our kids are our kids, and we trudge on, which is very stoic for me. I had a day of grief. I allowed myself one day where I felt, you know, it's that kind of feeling you have when you say to somebody, you know, I see this horrible thing, I see this car accident about to happen, and everybody goes, no, it's not. And then the car accident happens and everybody goes, oh, wow, you really called that. But there's no solace in that whatsoever, that we've been saying for a while, that the numbers are changing and that there are more. I just ask people this. Do you know 2 people in your life that don't have a diagnosis that you think likely, children I'm talking, friends, children, that people are like, nope, we're not going to get the dog? Because I know at least 2 people. And if we all know 2 people that don't have a diagnosis yet or are waiting for the diagnosis, then the number is different than 1 in 36.
And I had a feeling that was similar to the beginning of COVID.
Oh.
Because I didn't know what it means.
Oh.
And it was the same, it was fear of like this global issue. That where is this coming from? Why is this happening? And it was just the beginning. Remember, we had no idea what this means. And with autism, it's kind of like, I don't want to compare it to COVID because it's not, but it's a thing we know very little about, despite billions of dollars of research, you know, and we just are completely taken over by it and still don't have a direct connection.
Amazing. I'm looking to see, okay, I'm going to go ahead and announce the winners for this hour. And I guess, are we going to try to reconnect with Dr. Shore another time? I'm looking at Traven's face to see a yes or no. No, we couldn't hear him. But that's all right. Will you give him our apologies and say I will contact him and we'll try to get him on another time? Because we've only got like 3 minutes now before Dr. Grandin. This is me talking to my producer. Sorry, good
right
television.
ahead.
It's live. I do want to go over the winners of this hour's Discovery Toys gift certificates. These are all $25 gift certificates. Remember, once you've won one, you can't win again. So our winners in this hour are Amy Scott. No, I'm looking at the wrong ones. That was last hour, excuse me. In this hour, it's Our Journey, Cameron's New Life, woo, Sarah Sellery, Kelsey Eddings, Jim Miller, Simone Koch, 2008 R.A. Fix, Madeline Hahn, Matthew Asner is tuning in, Lou ZC, and R. You have won. R, have you seen the movie RRR? My favorite movie this year. I had to say that. That came up. I'm so sorry, but we're going to try to get Dr. Shore back in a different hour. We're going to invite him to come the last hour, but we've got 44 hours. We'll find another hour.
We've got lots of options for him.
We'll find a place where we can, because he's too fabulous to not have. So
Absolutely.
our apologies to him. We thought we could make it work, but we just need more time to make that work. But up next, we have the fabulous Dr. Temple Grandin.
Amazing.
And I'm so excited to be talking with her because, her new book came out today.
Yeah.
Autism and Education, the Way I See It, or As I See It. I think it's As I See It. Sorry, Temple. That's from Future Horizons, who is also the publisher of my book. We love Future Horizons. So we're really excited to talk with her about that. And you guys can be writing in your questions. We are going to continue the Discovery Toys giveaway in the next hour, and we will have 10 more gift certificates to give away. So that will be super fun. I see a bunch of questions. Matt Asner said that's a federal law, correct? But I don't know what you were referring to. About the age of 7 or aging out, Matt. I don't know if that's what you were referring to. Because we do have state laws and we have federal laws. We talked about that early this morning on the program, that there are state mandates about when your services can happen, and they say sometimes things like,
I think he was referring to access to care. Because we were talking about
denial of access to care.
Denial of access to care.
But that is federal. In both cases, it's an appeal.
Yes.
So there we are. Okay, I think you're absolutely right. All right, so we're going to say goodbye to you because you've been here a long, long time.
And again, at some point, I will have to say hello to Dr. Grandin, and I met her in 79 or 80.
Wow.
Long time ago.
So you were just a baby.
I was, through a mutual connection, Cecilia Fabulich, which I'm sure she might know.
I really thought you were going to say Fabulous, and I was going to say her name is Cecilia Fabulous.
She was fabulous. She is fabulous.
Okay, there we have it.
Greetings, and I hope you have a wonderful hour.
I'm sure we will, because it's always a wonderful hour with Dr.
Absolutely.
Grandin. All right, we're going to sign off from this hour. Stick with us, though. We're going to be back with Dr. Temple Grandin right after these messages. Don't forget, you can watch Ask Dr. Doreen live every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We hope to see you there.